right. So we are back again with the Got Value podcast. If you have been listening to any of the other episodes, you know these conversations, they spark change, ideas, especially those around how do I leverage who I am and what I do to build a career that is not only on purpose and in purpose, shout out to Jovi and Zane for that one, but also fulfills you in ways that you may not have thought of or even thought imaginable. So I am super excited to have you here today. Zing, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love what you're doing, and I think it's so good to get all of these perspectives from these different people because obviously all of our journeys are very different. It's funny how people, you define success, but people have different stories with how they've become successful. So I appreciate you going deep into those stories.
It truly is. And it's so funny that you say that every single person has a different path that they've taken. Mm-hmm. And by sharing and listening to a lot of these leader journeys and leader stories, like I like to call them, you can find out and see, well, where's their alignment? Where is their, if it wasn't the traditional way, then that means, maybe I don't have to take the traditional way too. So it gives you permission.
I love that. That's powerful.
Like it gives you like, okay, so then I can carve this out the way that works for me without feeling bad about it, without saying, oh, but it doesn't look like the traditional path or it is the traditional path, and being okay with both opposite ends of both of those spectrums.
That's right. That's absolutely correct.
So we're going to hop right on in. I'm a firm believer in knowing who you are and being confident in whomever that is, right? Like it informs your choices. And so I always like to ask, who do you say that you are?
Well, I'm unapologetically a Black woman who is a mom of 3 children, a wife. I am a career executive. I'm a good friend. I'm a good listener. I am all of the things that God has made me uniquely to be. And I appreciate that because I'm not like everybody else. There are certain things about me that perhaps may be quirky. There are things that are unique to me that may make me fit in with the crowd at times. There are things that make me stand all the way alone. And so I just embrace all of it. But those would be the things that would come to mind first.
I love that, especially the quirky portion, because I have long since been considered weird. Like I was called weird from a child. And it used to bother me, right? I used to get so irritated when people would call me weird, like, dang, you're so different. Like, why can't you just act right? And I finally came to the conclusion that, you know what? How I am and who I am is for a specific person or is for a specific group of people. So let me just find my tribe, find the folks who vibe with what I vibe with and what I vibe on, find them and love them hard.
Yeah. And they will love you back hard, right? So I don't think that, the uniqueness of individuals comes from being cookie cutters of one another. We really have to lean into what our purpose is, what our journey is. And the way that you get there is by spending time with yourself. I think a lot of times people look to others for answers, especially when they're unclear. They always, seek the opinion of someone else. And there's nobody that's going to actually have a better opinion about where your life should be or how you should live it other than you. But most of the time we do not trust ourselves. We do not trust our judgment. And so we even as human beings sometimes take advice from people who are less qualified than us to be giving us advice in those areas. And I'm thinking about specifically my dad. When I was young, he always used to tell me, don't take money tips from a bum. And I was like, what? He would say it all the time because, I would come home and say, my friend said this about this subject or this other friend thinks this. And he said, you need to stop taking money tips from a bum. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he's like, you're taking advice from people that are not qualified to give you advice in that area because they don't have that experience. So if anything, if you're going to take money tips, take it from a banker, take it from somebody that deals with money, right? And I use that analogy because it really translates into the many facets of our lives. Even as I have leaned into motherhood, I'm a new mom. In that my kids are young. I have a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 9-month-old. And so as a new mom, I would say that the best advice that I've ever received are from women that are mothers. It's not that my friends without children don't have a perspective. They do have a perspective, and that can be valuable also. But for some reason, when I'm talking about those hardcore issues and those day-to-day issues that need to be solved, the best advice has been from people who have been down that road.
Yeah. Because how can you teach someone how to sail if you've never had to prepare a boat to go on the water and actually develop your skill by doing? I'm a firm believer. Confidence is built by doing. Your skills are developed by actually activating those. You could read it in a book all day long, but there is nothing like on the job training.
That's absolutely correct.
You can do all day long and say, oh, well, theoretically, this theory means nothing when it comes to practical life.
Theory doesn't mean a lot when you've got 3 kids who are wild and screaming. I need someone who can give me some real advice.
Exactly. Even now in terms of my own parenting. So my daughter, and like I said, she's 11, and she was talking to me about an experience that she's having and that she's confused about and that frustrates her. And so I was like, oh, this is something new. So I reached out to one of my girlfriends who has a 13-year-old. I'm like, hey, what did you do with this? I could have, theoretically gone to one of my best friends who doesn't have kids, and she could have given me great insight.
Sure.
But not the type of insight that I needed to have with someone who has actually walked that path. And for me, which is also too why I really, really love speaking and having any conversation with you, because there was a talk that you did a while ago about the 2 most important days of your life. You said the day you were born and the day you find out why. And you've done so much in your lifetime. And you were not even I feel like you just tapping in on the surface, and you've done some amazing things.
Thank
but if
you.
you had to sum up, you are most welcome. But if you had to sum up your personal life's mission in one sentence, what would that be?
I would just say my personal life mission is to elevate and enhance the experience of people on the margins so that they can fully appreciate the fullness that life has to offer.
Ooh. When you say, ooh, and of course that was real good. To fully appreciate what life has to offer, that means understanding where the opportunities lie. I'm a firm believer in don't tell people of color when they get into an organization to work harder, primarily because many times if they've gotten to a place to where they are either on the cusp of management or in upper management, working hard has not been their thing, especially if they're an emerging leader. For me, I'm a firm believer is show them the strategy, how to connect with folks who they need to know in order to help them grow and get into those positions, because you can work hard as ever, keep your head down, and everyone else will be promoted, who maybe have started alongside you, but they may be promoted above you because you didn't know that it's more than just working hard.
That's right. I mean, you summed it up correctly. There's not necessarily an even playing field in this thing that we call life. Sure, we all come into this world not knowing what our gender is going to be, what our race is going to be, what socioeconomic status we're going to be born into. These are things we have no control over. Over time, we start to get control over some of the things that lead us to our destiny, like deciding to study. You can decide to do it or not, and sure, there are life circumstances that may prevent that or make it harder. But at some point, we have to lean into our challenges and decide, are we going to let these things overtake us, or are we going to step up to the plate? It's like that saying that Dr. King used so frequently that I think is brilliant. It's just genius when he said, the same boiling water that makes a potato soft is the same boiling water that makes an egg hard. It's not about your circumstances, but it's about how you react to them. And so I think that a lot of times our destiny in many ways is in our hands. It's the decisions that we make given these circumstances that we've been put in to decide, are we going to fight or flight?
Yeah. Which one are we going to do? What is it looking like? What will your choice be? And with you, because you've had such a myriad of experiences, how has what you've needed or experienced, how has it like framed how you've not only built your career, but advanced your own career and then the career of others as well?
Well, I'll just say that my upbringing was really important. I was raised by two educators. My mother died when I was young. I was 16 years old when I lost her. And I think that for me was the pivotal moment in my life. Just watching her struggle as an educator, even though she had a master's degree and she was a teacher, she oftentimes was struggling to make ends meet. Very hard for her and my dad to figure out how to get the bills paid. And for me, that was baffling, right? Because you've got two teachers. But back then, when I was growing up, their salaries were high 30s, low 40,000. So, obviously things have changed and evolved in terms of the dynamic of pay equity and how educators are being compensated. But, for me, I saw two people that worked hard to put themselves through college. They didn't come from educated people at all, and yet they were still struggling financially. And so I think for me, the pivotal moment in her dying and at the age of 47 and me not seeing her realize some of the goals that I heard her express, I didn't want that to be my destiny. I didn't want to leave this earth and not accomplish things that could have been in my reach. Same thing with my dad. He lived longer, but he ultimately passed away in his early 60s. And he used to talk to me about traveling to Paris all the time. It was his dream. He was a history professor, and he wanted to go to the Louvre, and he wanted to see the Eiffel Tower and all of, walk down Champs-Élysées. And so he would just talk about it so much. And I said, Dad, go to Paris, go buy yourself a ticket.
Go have fun.
Yeah. And he never got there. He passed away without getting there. And so I remember the first international trip that I took after his death was to Paris. Mm-hmm. And I did that in his honor because he never got there. And so anyway, for me, I would say part of the way that I have been able to be very focused about landing in certain places professionally, or even my personal goals around marriage and motherhood, it was very much informed by my upbringing and what happened that was good and things that did not happen that were not good.
Yeah. I do love that, because it is all about perspective and then analyzing what works and what doesn't. That's so right. If okay, and for me, I have a family who has a number of issues when it comes to the health of their heart. Mm-hmm. So I have taken a look at, this is how you guys have, and it's not a disrespectful thing, but it is let me call a spade and take a look at, okay, so these are the choices and decisions that you've been making. These are the consistent outcomes. What can I do differently to ensure that I am not getting those same outcomes, because it doesn't work for me. If I'm gonna be around, I want to be kicking. I want to be, doing all the things.
Absolutely. You want to be vibrantly here. You don't want to be laid up in a hospital bed.
Not at all. Like even when you and I met, I think we met on the dance floor in Hawaii. That's the type of energy I want to maintain.
That's exactly where we met, in Maui.
Yes, on the dance floor. I don't even remember what we were dancing to. I just know it was a really good song. And I love folks who have bright spirits. It's not necessarily about what you have on, but just like a bright and open spirit. And you were just that. Like,
thank
you could feel it,
Thank you. What I appreciate that. What I'll say about that trip and just meeting you is that it was a lesson for me that we have to stay in touch with people that we meet. So often I see people, even at functions where it's a networking event, just handing out cards and going through the motions. And it seems like it's almost performative in many ways. There's no real intention to understand who you're meeting or get to know their journey. I rarely hear that. Oftentimes the question people ask me, what do you do? That's the first thing they ask me. What do you do?
I hate
and I say, you know what I do? I play on the weekends with my kids. You know, I go traveling, you know, like, cause if you're asking me, where do I work? That's a very different question. Mm-hmm. So, you know, what I appreciate about meeting you is that not only were you authentic and sweet and kind, but you were very sincere in your effort to keep our friendship alive over time. And so we've been able to do great things together, I think, in a short period of time and collaborate. And you helped bring me a major piece of talent to Mosaic through Soledad O'Brien. And, you know, I feel like you've just been very supportive throughout the years. And I appreciate that. But that's why when people go out and network, even if you meet two people, but they are two meaningful connections, that is so much more important than handing out 20 cards.
Yes, I tell people all the time, and it's no disrespect to the business card industry, but I never carry a business card. I don't want a business card because I don't want you to be so focused on what I do that you never get to know who I am. Because what I do and who I am, that's not the same person.
No.
I mean, it is a portion, but it's not who I am. It's just what I happen to do. And yes, I'm excellent at it, but there's a person here.
That's
and
right.
If we start to treat people, which is also too why I don't use the word networking. I prefer to call it relationship building. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to meet every person in the room because if you dip if you're drinking out of every cup, you never know where the poison comes from.
Oh.
I'm just saying.
Well, goodness, I didn't know there was poison in cups, but you know, now that you have put that out there, I will not be drinking behind anybody anymore.
I'm just saying, and this is so off topic, but I had a friend who caught meningitis from drinking after multiple people, and she had sickle cell trait, and so it almost took her out. So for me, it's like, and I was young, I was a teenager, but even then I was like, everything is not for everybody, and that's okay.
That's correct.
Be okay with knowing everything is not for you. And so for me, when it's building relationships, I'm not so focused on what it is that you do. I would like to know what type of person are you? Because I like to believe I'm a collector of good people.
Yes.
I like good energy. I want to be able to laugh and joke. We'll get to the business because, I mean, excellence does what excellence does. We'll get to the business, but who are you as a person? What does that look like? Because I'm a firm believer we all have value, right?
Right.
And I believe that our intrinsic value, aka our skills, talents, all those things, they truly are the solution to problems, right? And so how have you created and provided access to opportunities for those who are marginalized to further develop and even utilize, their intrinsic value and skills?
Man, I don't know where to start on that question because I have been doing community service and giving back since childhood because that was something that my parents made me do on the weekends with them, especially as an only child. When you're an only child, you become an adult very quickly. I mean, you're around adults all the time. They take you to their friends because you don't have friends, right? So I ended up doing a lot of community service projects with my parents as a youth. And then that just became something I naturally wanted to do into my adulthood. So I continued along that path, long-term projects. So for instance, I'm a mentor for a program called Sister to Sister, which is Spelman College's program that they've implemented for local alumni. So alumni that live within the Atlanta area that are able to give their time and resources to women that are juniors and seniors at school. And so I go on campus and I spend time and I mentor and facilitate all types of trainings that might happen throughout the course of the year, et cetera. And so for me, that's just one example. But in my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, there are lots of opportunities in which I am giving to youth specifically. I was on the board of Youth Spark for a long time, which is an organization, a 501c3 that supports youth that have been a part of, I would say, the sex trafficking industry.
Oh, wow.
And so to hear some of their stories, it's just unbelievable how resilient and strong these kids are. being kidnapped, from their home environments, raped, misused, misguided, and then landing on their feet somehow because of others being helpful. And so those are a couple of examples, but honestly, Alechia, it's a lifelong journey for me. Service is not something where I check the box and say one and done. It's also something that I'm instilling in my children, and making them, every time they get a toy, they have to give me a toy because they know it's going in this big box that we're going to be giving to the homeless children. Yeah. Or same thing with their clothing, right? So just showing them that you don't just receive things without having to give something back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's too one of the most valuable things you can teach a child, to help them understand that this is a circle. Like we are all interconnected in one way or the other. So by you receiving, it is just how it works, and that you are supposed to give back. Because if you get your hands too full, you can't accept anything else because you're unwilling to release and let go.
That's absolutely right.
Ooh, it's for me, and you were talking earlier too about teachers, and it kind of brought something to my mind, in that I know a teacher now who the starting pay is $45,000. So it has not grown much from when your parents were educators. And that brings me to another point, or another question, in that, how do you, especially when you're looking to excel professionally, how do you, or how have you, or what do you do to honor yourself and also to communicate your needs? Because for many of us, especially women, men usually are a little better at it. But how do you, or how have you expressed, hey, this is what I need in terms of not only financial, but also in terms of professional development? Like, what has that been for you?
Such a great question. I would just say that, since it is a two-part question, I'll talk about professional development first. I started my career as an HR professional. And so part of the intrinsic nature of being in HR is talent development. And so it was taught to me as a practitioner that not only do we need to provide professional development opportunities for our staff in order to keep their skills good, in order to keep them highly motivated and intrigued about the work going on in our workplace, but we have to do the same thing for ourselves if we're going to serve that population well. So that was instilled in me as a very junior practitioner. So I never, ever questioned, as I moved up or moved on, I never questioned, should I be asking for training and development? I always just thought, this is actually required of me because I can't help a developing and evolving workforce lean into their new responsibilities if I'm not going in a parallel path. So that's how I think about professional development. In terms of the flip side, which is, money and compensation and ensuring that I'm asking for the things that I deserve, I will say that I gained that confidence while working at the NFL, because my mentor was a person, he's still my mentor to this day, but he was a white man in power. And so he took me under his wing in terms of mentoring me and helping to guide and shepherd my career. And some of the lessons that he would give me, his training was in finance. So money was something that was extremely important. And he managed big budgets and he helped our corporate development function. And so he would instill in me that this is what a negotiation looks like. Whether we're negotiating a sponsorship deal, whether you're negotiating your next salary or your next professional move, this is what a negotiation looks like. And here are some of the steps that you have to take in order to get to your goal. And you must stay steadfast. And so he kind of instilled this in me. And so I felt more confident to do it over and over. I think once you get it done the first time and you stand your ground and you say, this is the salary that I want and I'm not budging or wavering, and then they actually meet you where you want to be, then you're like, oh, okay, I can do that again. And I can do it better next time, So, but you do need that one time, I think, to instill that confidence in you. And then you've got to have people around you that show you the art of negotiating. Like, it's not something that I read in a book. I learned from a master negotiator. And that's why, again, I go back to that, don't take money tips from a bum. If someone's giving you bad advice about how to move up and they haven't moved up, maybe they're not the one.
They're not the one. They are not the one. And that's okay to honor the fact that they are not the one.
Correct.
But you just
no knock on them.
It's not. It is. Listen, every person has a place, a position where either they are or you know what they do, and that's okay. Honor where they are, but you can also honor where they are and who they are, and also acknowledge that you desire to go a different path.
That's correct.
That's okay.
It's okay.
That's okay. And you said something in there too that was so good, and it was about mentorship. One of the most prevalent questions that I have always had and also have is how do you identify someone to not only be your mentor, not even identify, but how do you actually secure it? Like, it's easy to identify. You look, you say, this person's doing some great work. But how do you secure it without asking the will you be my mentor question?
Yeah, I think that is such an awkward question. I actually do. And people ask that question a lot. Here's my thing. If someone is in your space, however they show up in your space, and they're giving you off the record counsel, or you can give them a question and they're giving you their honest opinion and being candid, and there's a level of trust, I think unofficially they will become your mentor. A mentor is just a word. It's kind of like the word strategy. I think it's overused. People say strategy all the time. I'm like, what are you talking? What do you even mean?
What is it?
You know, and so I think we talk about mentorship the same way. And it's like, someone is not your mentor because you ask them to be. Someone is your mentor when they start organically pouring into you, being there for you in the moments that you need them, being available to help shepherd you along the way. That's a mentor. So it doesn't always, you know, so when people ask me, well, who are your mentors? I'm like, I can rattle off 5 names and they may not know that they're my mentors, but they are. because the times that I need to pick their brains about work, about parenting, about marriage, about all of these things that I have going on, they're able to meet me where I'm at, give me good counsel. They genuinely care to be helpful. And so that's your mentor.
Yes. It's a verb, kind of like ally, support, love. For me, all of those are verbs. Mentorship is a verb, but it's also a two-way type of thing. If you,
absolutely.
Same thing like with your children, how if you're only ever open to receive and never give. My best mentorship relationships, I never asked them to be my mentor, but it was always how can I serve you? What do you need? And that
absolutely.
To, like, it's asking a question, especially the higher up the person is, the more people who they have pulling on them. It's just more people who are pulling. So how can you become an asset versus being seen as a liability? What does it look like for you to give back, to ask them what they are in need of? Because we all have something of value that we bring to the table, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you're reminding me of the story. So a long time ago, I wrote an op-ed in PR Week, and I would say like a week after it was published, a young lady reached out to me on email. I was working at a PR agency at the time, and she said, hey, I read your article, loved it, super interesting. Wondered if we can keep in touch from time to time. And I don't even remember if I wrote her back initially. And then she reached out again and said, hey, I'm sure you're busy, but here's an article that I found that's aligned with the work you're doing in diversity. I think it's a new trend and it's pretty interesting. Not sure if you saw it. So I read the article. It was a New York Times article. And I was like, wow, I didn't see this. And this is very interesting content. So I wrote her back and I was like, thank you so much. That was so, kind of you. And she said, absolutely. I like to do research. Anytime I come across something and I think it can be helpful, I'll send it to you. And so maybe a month later, she sent me a PowerPoint presentation that she put together. It was all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. She did a lot of research. She found some insights from best practices in the industry. And she said, I put this presentation together for you. I don't know if you can use it, but if I were you, I might think about showing it to my executive committee. I mean, it had all of this data, beautiful graphics. It was crazy. And I thought to myself, who is this person? And so it intrigued me. so she said, well, if you ever have time to meet up for lunch or dinner, I would just love to talk for 30 minutes. Of course I'm going to talk now, right? Because she gave me all of this stuff. It was unprompted. I didn't ask. She just volunteered herself. Years later, we're in what I would call mentor-mentee relationship, but it's become a lot more of a friendship along the way. Yeah. And I was able to help her break into the NBA. She was in PR at the time. She got a big job at the Brooklyn Nets. And now she is at the San Antonio Spurs and just became a vice president and made Sports Business Journal's 30 under 30 list. And I'll be at her ceremony next week in New York. Yes. So, she's somebody who I would always think of as a proactive mentee that was very intentional about giving before ever asking to receive. So by the time she needed to do a little bit of networking here and there, I was like, oh, happy to give numbers away, happy to make connections, because this is somebody who gave me a lot when I didn't even ask.
Whew, I just got chills because I'm a firm believer in give before you ask. Mm-hmm. Like, how can you show up for someone else? I'm a firm believer in being a servant leader. It takes you nothing, especially if this is what you like to do. If research is her thing, it took her nothing. Now, for somebody else, it may take them 5 days, right?
Sure.
To do that level of research. But since it's what she loves, and I don't know how long it took her, but let's say it took her 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours. Mm-hmm. What was the value in giving that to you? And no, I don't know how long it took her, but we just going to say 5 hours.
Sure.
What was the value in her giving you that piece of information, that PowerPoint that took her, let's say, maybe 5 hours, and what it's now gifted her in the terms of a friendship, a mentorship opportunity and career growth, that being intentional, that going into an organization and being and I know you don't like the word strategy, but being strategic enough to
I don't hate the word if you use it properly, which you just did. Some people are just saying strategy and they ain't talking about it.
And it's not strategy.
But you're making sense when you say it. So I get it.
But being strategic enough to go into an organization to survey the landscape and then find someone who you can communicate, hey, this is where I would like to grow. That's so right. What do you suggest when, especially for marginalized individuals, or as you say, folks who are on the margin, like how can they leverage their value? And when they are going into an organization, communicate, hey, this is where and how I would like to grow. Like, how do you suggest that happens? Because there are a number of folks who they get upset. Oh, I'm not growing in this organization. Oh, this isn't happening. This isn't happening. And it's like, did you tell anyone that this is where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. People, closed mouths don't get fed. So number one, you need to speak up. If there are things on your mind, understand that everybody in the workplace, we're all human. Even if you're a manager, even if you're an EVP, even if you're very senior, you're still a human. You still have a family life. You still have a lot that you're juggling. And so your first thought may not be, how can I develop Alechia today? I mean, when you wake up in the morning, you might be like, I've got to get these kids out the door. I've got to finish this presentation. I've got to think about my client. You've got a lot. So I always tell people, do not assume that you are the first thing on somebody's mind. Right, wrong, or indifferent. The second thing is, we have to, especially people that are historically excluded. I don't say underrepresented because there's nothing underrepresented about us. We're highly represented. We're just historically excluded. And so for people in that category, I would say we have to stop thinking of ourselves as on the margins. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's no one like me here, so I'm just going to be quiet. Or I don't know if I'm worthy, so I'm just going to sit back. Because, especially when you're in these majority cultures and situations, part of the way that people grade you is by your ability to be assertive, to speak up, to be a contributor. And so listening is important. It is a very important skill set that a lot of people don't demonstrate. But you also have to add value by talking and by giving. You do. I mean, right. So I think a lot of times I've seen situations where Black and brown people are just quiet in meetings because the environment doesn't make them feel included. The environment feels strange. And so adding your voice in a room where you're already uncomfortable is perhaps not the first thing that you would jump to do, but we have to tell ourselves we are worthy. We are here for a reason. This did not happen by accident. We were chosen for a greater purpose, and believe this stuff. Because if you have the belief that you are there to do something great and you have been selected and chosen, then you will feel more confident when the opportunity comes to add value.
Yes. Oh, I really, really like that, because it's that if you don't believe you, why would anybody else?
That's right.
If you're not confident in what you do, who you are, what you bring to the table. And I was in another interview and I said, people many times, and you even actually talked about it, and I would love it if you could even, tap into that story, where people will look at all the things that they're not. Like, well, I don't have this. I'm not this. I don't have this. I haven't been able to do that. There's no one else like me. All of the things that you're not. And rarely focus on, but what are the things that you are? Perception is everything. Mm-hmm. What are you going to lead with? I may not know these 150 things, but I am a beast at these 3.
Yeah. And you don't need to be a beast at 50 things, because there's no such thing there. That's that saying, jack of all trades, master of none. That's what some of these people that are in these meetings talking about all of these things, they don't have a master of anything. They certainly have learned how to navigate the system and know the rhetoric that it would be required in order for people to believe that they are adding value. But if you peel back the layers of that onion and get to the heart of what is being communicated, oftentimes it's fluff. And so I'm a very good listener, and I listen with intention, because I realize that a lot of people are not saying things of substance. And so for me, I just think that being a subject matter expert in 1 or 2 areas and really going deep and knowing the ins and outs of that area, especially if that area is something that your organization desperately needs but doesn't know how to do, for me, that's how you become invaluable. So like me, I became a DEI expert a long, long time ago, long before DEI was popular. Right now I feel like it's very popular post George Floyd, but I'm a pre-George Floyd practitioner. Who studied this stuff very deeply, both from a theoretical perspective and a practical perspective. And so for me, it's been invaluable to be an expert in DEI, because a lot of organizations are now leaning into it. They want to get active, and they're just people that don't know what they're doing. So for me, I'm more valuable in this space than to be a broad HR practitioner like I started my career. And no knock on HR, because it gave me a great, I would say, platform to begin this work. Mm-hmm. But, an HR generalist is very different than a DEI leader who is, needed right now for everything that we have to manage that's going on in the world. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so then you, in a speech that you had done previously, you talked about, it was a white paper and there being a speck on the paper. When you gave that example, it helped me to remember, even in the things that I'm going through right now, because my life right now is in a very interesting place. Mm-hmm. I'm always brought back to that, in that focus on, yes, there may be a dot, and I would love for you to elaborate.
I'll tell the story.
I'm not going to tell it right.
So when I was in college, me and my classmates, we showed up to class one day, and our English professor said, "I'm giving you guys a pop quiz." And we were like, okay. And then she was like, she was handing out the papers. She faced them down so we couldn't actually see what was on the paper. And she's like, "I want you all to begin at the same time." So when she passed out the papers, we flipped them over, and there was just a big, like a black dot in the middle of the page, but there were no words, no questions, no text. So I'm like, we're all looking at each other. And she said, "I want you to write what you see there. So take time and write what you see. And then we'll go over this assignment when we're done." So we were kind of like, okay. So she gave us about 20 minutes to just write. And when she collected the paper, she said, I'm not going to grade you on this exam, but let's see what you all wrote. So she was reading each one aloud, and without exception, every single person wrote something about the black dot. That's all we could focus on. That's all we could concentrate on. And so she told us, she said, it's funny, you all concentrated on the black dot. And the same thing happens in our lives. The white space, no one wrote about the white space. No one wrote about this empty canvas that you can pretty much create anything from. We just focus on that one black dot. And so she said the same thing happens in our lives. Our life is a white space. It's a canvas that has been given to us to enjoy. There are great things around us. Our family, our friends, having a home, having a job, having healthy children, having your own health, whatever it is, there's a lot to enjoy. But, the black spots can be a complicated relationship that you might be going through. Or, you might have a money challenge where you're falling short and don't know how you're going to make ends meet at the moment. Or even small health challenges, a cold, a flu, things of that nature. And so sometimes we get so consumed with those dark spots that we do not enjoy all of this white space around us. And so her challenge to us was find a way to appreciate what's good in life, because there's a lot. It's not like there's a little bit. There's a lot that's good in life, especially and I think about this post-COVID, as we still are managing the pandemic. There are a million people dead that were not supposed to be dead. Like half of them were just living their normal lives and weren't sick or anything. And then here they come with this virus that took them out in 2 weeks. So we watched that. And we can never get those people back. It's done. And so I think about that. I think about the fact that if we're here in whatever capacity, there must be a purpose and a reason, because some people didn't make it. So that, for me, that's how I think about the white space and the black dot. Oh, I can't hear you.
Whoops, there we go. The reason I wanted you to share that is because in my own life, and also as we are growing and excelling, whether it's in our business or in our careers, there will be moments where there are points of contention, when things don't go right, when, it flat out fails. But if we do focus on the things that are maybe overshadowing that all that white space that we have to create and build and grow and advance and all the things, we miss out on the goodness that life still has to offer us, because we all get tired. It's a thing. We truly do all get tired. Mm-hmm. But I like to believe that our purpose is what drives us when giving up seems easiest. So what has been a driving force for you to keep you going, even when you've had to pivot?
My kids. I mean, hands down. Once they came, I literally, that they were the reason for me being. I mean, I rarely think about myself before I think about them. I feel very responsible for providing them with a better life than me or my husband had. And when I say a better life, I mean more access to better education, access to better healthcare, proximity to better amenities, just a better life. I think that's what every parent wants for their child. And so, my kids are the reason why I do everything I do. If I was, single person without them, I think I would move very differently through life, probably more self-motivated. Yeah. And I'm saying that not to knock anybody who doesn't have kids or a spouse, because I was that person. I was single without kids for a long time. I didn't have kids until I was 37, 37, 39, and 41. So later in life. But I would say that for me, once they came, everything changed, my whole perspective. And I realized that I can't be selfish And I am compelled, because God gave them to me as a gift and a blessing. I must do everything I can to make sure and ensure that they are not only have a good life for themselves, but that they know how to create good environments for others. When my daughter was born, she's my oldest, I remember I was probably 7 months pregnant. I was at a wedding, and this venue had a sign in the venue. And the venue said, now I might have to paraphrase, but the sentiment was, when you grow up, go into the world and do well. But most importantly, go into the world and do good.
I love it.
And I took a picture of it, and I thought, like, that message was for me because I was pregnant with my first baby. But I was like, that's what my message for this child is. Like, you can go do well all you want to. Go get a nice job. Go get a good fancy degree. But do good. Do something for somebody else. Help the homeless. Feed the hungry. Do good. So that, for me, that's what drives me. And my kids are the reason.
I love it. Oh, this was such a good conversation. I want to close out with, because again, to me, you're brilliance personified. Like, watching you move, hearing you speak, there's always something that I learn and glean from it, which is why I like listening to you speak so much. Whether it's in conversation or on a video, whatever it is, to me, you're just brilliant.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. But what would you say has been either the best piece of career advice you've ever received, or the best piece of career advice you've ever given? I want to close it out on some advice that you can give.
Well, the one that I received is the one that I now give. So it's actually the same piece of advice. Okay. But I received this piece of advice years ago, and my manager said, don't get too high on the highs and don't get too low on the lows. Try to stay even. And I think she gave me that feedback because something was happening in the workplace. And I don't remember the specific example, but it was like I had worked really hard on this presentation and got all these people together and presented an idea. And it was just totally poo-pooed, thrown out, never considered. And I was devastated. I felt like a failure, and I had worked with all these people, and this was my work product, and it was thrown out. And she said, look, this is just a low moment. There's going to be a high moment, where something exceptional happens, and don't get too high on that either, because that may not last forever. So in other words, the advice is, don't let your emotions or the emotion of the moment take over your better judgment or your ability to be rational.
Ooh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, because when people are either really happy or really sad, they either become unnaturally excitable or overly depressed. And you can't make clear decisions in that emotional state, either one of those states. So the goal is to try to stay even.
Listen, that one was just for me. So thank you. I'm going to share it with others when they listen to the podcast. But that one was for me. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But no, again, I thank you so much just for your time, your energy, your sharing space. I do not take it lightly because I understand how busy you are, especially with a hubby and 3 children and a career. So I am going to.
And a dog.
And the dog. See, I forgot. That's a lot of people.
Yes.
So no, thank you for just sharing space. I am so grateful. I cannot wait until others hear this conversation. Oh. It is going to change them the way it has enlightened and changed me. So thank you.
Well, thanks for thinking of me. That makes me feel special. I love the work you do. You're just so talented, and you're such a giver. And so the fact that you would even think to include me blows my mind. I'm like, I hope that I was able to give you what you needed and wanted today.
You did all the things, as you always do. I told you, brilliance personified. You don't even got to do much. You just show up.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And I will see you guys next time on the Got Value podcast. Join the tribe. There's so much more that is happening, and I will see you next time. Bye. Thank you for joining us on the Got Value podcast. Remember, there is true value in purpose, and the greatest discovery of your life will be exactly what yours is. Stay connected with us at GotValueNation.com.